clearly a genocide. I don't see how one can. By now, I think it's almost you need a lot of denialism and negation in order to say it's not a genocide. It's going to be a stain on Jewish and Israeli history for generations to come. The volume of dehumanization was so disgusting. I mean, I knew there was dehumanization of the Palestinian, but not to that level. My name is Amos Goldberg, and I'm a professor of Holocaust history at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I lived all my life in Jerusalem. Clearly, it is a genocide. Before dwelling into definitions and when something is destroyed as a genocide, so many killed as a genocide. You hear so much genocidal talk and dehumanization, then it's a genocide, by common sense. We can go deeper into it, but for me, there is no, and I think there is no doubt that this is a genocide, and I don't say it lightly, and I don't say it as a word. I understand the enormity of the word. It's going to be a stain on Jewish and Israeli history for generations to come. And I reached this conclusion not immediately at the beginning of the war. It took me some time, but by April, I wrote an article answering myself, yes, it is a genocide, because I didn't want to see it as a genocide. I wanted to believe that we are capable of many things, but not genocide. But here we are. Yes, it is a genocide. It is a very, very cruel and heinous genocide. Legally, I think there is what is needed is an intent to destroy in whole or in part the group as such. That's the core of the legal definition. And with destroy, there are 5 acts of genocide, at least 3, if not 4 of them, which the convention specify Israel is doing, we are doing. So we have the intent. How do we know the intent? To destroy, it doesn't have to destroy each and every human being in Gaza. It's the convention understands that destruction might be in whole or in part. So even if Israel is right that it does not try specifically to kill each and every Palestinian in Gaza, like in the Holocaust, it is still a genocide because the genocide convention legally acknowledges a possibility that the destruction of part of the group, a large part of the group, could be considered genocide. But what we see here is an intent to destroy this group as such. And how do we know the intent? Because Israelis, officials, army officers, media people, I can say the public mood and the public atmosphere is genocidal intent. Everybody is talking about destroying Gaza completely. And this was said from day one. So we have the intent pretty much explicit. We have the actions that express this intent in unbelievable killing spree that much beyond fighting the Hamas. I don't know how many Hamas fighters were killed, but it's obvious by now that most of those who were killed were not Hamas. And the overwhelming destruction of Gaza. So you see the outcome of a total destruction. So you see here, undoubtedly, intent to destroy in whole or in part, and you have killing, you have injuring, and you have creating, particularly with this horrible starvation that Israel imposed already before the ceasefire, but since it broke the ceasefire, it's a complete siege, creates conditions, as Act number 3 in the conventions specifies, of mass death and injuries and traumatizing. So you have all the criteria to adhere to the convention. So I think legally, and by now, to the best of my knowledge, and I do follow most of the legal experts in the field, in human rights organizations, and other experts, including the most prestigious one, acknowledge it to be a genocide, except, of course, for the Israelis and their supporters, that just part of a propaganda machine, not more than that. So I think couldn't be taken seriously. But beside that, as a historian, if we go back to the person who created the term genocide, which was Raphael Lemkin, a Jewish Polish lawyer, he elaborates on what does he mean by genocide. And what he meant, while the convention, because of political reasons, puts huge emphasis on the intention, it's not only the intention, it's much about the outcome also in his writings. What we see now as a historian, I could say two things. First, we see a complete destruction of Gaza. Gaza does not exist anymore as a collective, with institutions, with resources, housing, with infrastructure, with hospitals. This was completely destroyed, while we still don't know how many were killed, at least 55,000 by now. This is only the count of the ones who were killed directly. We don't know how many were killed died indirectly because of the deliberate destruction of the health system. How many starved to death? How many died from diseases? I can think of all those who need dialysis, for example, or cancer, or have any other disease which if you are not treated, you die. All those people, so we still don't, and all those who are still under the rubble, we don't know how many died. But it's a huge number who died. And the whole collective Palestinian in Gaza was completely destroyed. This is the distinction between mass killing and genocide. Genocide is a crime, is an act to destroy a collective. And this is what we see. We see that the collective, it's the people and the infrastructure, the institutions that create the very possibility of life, including eating, was completely destroyed. So for me, it's undoubtedly a genocide. The war is not on Hamas, and it was never on Hamas. It was on the Palestinians in Gaza, and now we see it clear in our face when the policy is not to expel Hamas, but to expel all Gazans, according to the Trump Riviera plan, to expel all Gazans out of Gaza. If this is the official Israeli policy, then it's a war on the Palestinians. It's not a war on Hamas. And now we reached a point where Israeli government and much of the Jewish Israeli population in Israel think that they have the final solution to the Palestinian problem, at least in Gaza. So for me, it is undoubtedly a genocide. It is because a genocide, in its simple form and understanding, is destroying a collective as such. And this is exactly what we see in Gaza. But October 7th was a huge blow and trauma. I mean, some 800 civilians, more or less, were killed in one day. It was a real trauma. And as I say many places, I try to reconstruct of my feeling. It was despicable and with awe because it was so personal. On the psychological level, I mean, it was such huge amounts of death and atrocities and as I said, personal. So the first days were, yes, of course, we have the right to self defense and to back off the attack and even retaliate to a certain degree. But I checked before. I checked it already on the 10th of October when this mass bombardment from the aerial bombardment started. I wrote in a WhatsApp group at the university, as heinous as the 7th of October was, it's going in a very bad way, and it could not justify those bombardments. And then I didn't consider it a genocide, though retroactively, we know that the first month was the most lethal month in the 21st century for children in the entire world. This is the statistics. And then on October 13th, some of my colleagues who are also friends published the first articles about this as a textbook of genocide, because not only that the bombardments were unbelievably cruel and lethal, but because the rhetoric was completely genocidal. We have to destroy. It's not about precision, it's about destruction. There is no innocent, a total siege. And the volume of dehumanization was so disgusting. I mean, I knew there was dehumanization of the Palestinian, but not to that level. So, but at that time, I couldn't think it was a genocide still, because genocide, as I said, is a really deliberate attempt to destroy a collective. And I still thought okay, it was some kind of overreacting, as Israel always overreacts. Though I always thought 800 deaths in one day or in a short time, this is something that the Palestinians experience in various cycles. But for us, it was really such a, communities were completely destroyed, and colleagues and friends were either killed or taken hostages, or it was too personal. I still thought it in this way. And in December and January, with December was South Africa taking Israel to the ICJ, and in January we already heard the first provisional measures, and the ICJ, which said it is plausible that Israel is committing a genocide in a more legal. This is what they actually said, even if in legal terms, that we. And I started understanding that it's really way beyond what I even imagined. And I read. I started reading all. I mean, I was following at the time all the reports, and I follow it very closely, and I understood that a huge crime is taking place. You don't want to admit it. It's very difficult to admit that you are part of a genocide society, even though I understood that it's a racist society where are committing apartheid. But this step to take this leap, and I think in April, when I read the investigation by Yuval Avraham about the AI machines that pick, that choose the targets, and that the IDF actually permits any killing to destroy, even to kill almost all amount of collateral damage, to destroy even a middle rank officer in the Hamas. I understood that everybody in Palestine is a target. It's about everybody. And actually they admit, publicly they say there's no innocent in Gaza, and we starve them all, and we all know what they mean. But I understood that if this is the amount, because before that, I think when they assassinated Shahada in 2013, I don't remember exactly, but one of the the high rank officers, the amount of collateral damage was 13 or 14 or something like that. Now it was a carte blanche for 300, an entire neighborhood to take down for one middle rank officer. And then it came home to me that there is no way other but to it's an assault on the Palestinian people. It's not an assault on Hamas, because they know that in this way of total siege, of such bombing, this is the consequences. To somehow be able to say what we see and still feel what we felt about our casualties, our trauma, our 7th of October. It really took some time to find words to put together the cognitive and the emotional trauma that we have felt, despite what we had gone through since the October 7th and since October 7th. It is a genocide, and we are committing something that will haunt Jewish history. Nearly 2 years, a year and 9 months. And how the Gazans who are still alive, how they still live, what kind of life they live, and what kind of life they will live once it's over, we see hell on earth for so many months. And the Israelis, most of the Israelis support it. The world, including the liberal world or the democratic world, and the Arab, at least the Arab regimes, just sit by and let it happen. We still don't know how, but everything is going to be different after the genocide in Gaza. I mean, as I said, we are not the victims here, of course. The victims who suffer daily on unimaginable suffering and still manage to resist and to be resilient and try to keep life going are the Gazans, and also in the West Bank in a different way. But for us Jews and Israelis, it's a turning point of history, in history, for the bad.